Hello everybody! Groundback here. Today was the first day of the Generation Jumble and it was already a very big success. We had at least 12 people join the server. We had a lot of different battles. I got to play with a lot of new people. So far it's been pretty great. And with the few test battles that I did, I already have some thoughts on this format. And I think that there's a lot of untapped potential. And I think it's going to be very different from both Generation Jumble Season 1 and even normal RBYOU. Now, I already made a tier list for Season 1. You're always free to check that out if you want to. And this one, I think, honestly, it's going to be hard to tell, especially for the top things. Because, unlike last season, where Sceptile and Metagross were pretty easily the top dogs, this time, it's going to be way more competitive. And because of that, even stuff like the big three won't be as, obvious as you might think. Now, one last thing I'll say is that not only should you join the Discord server, but from now on, every single link to my videos will also have the Google Doc for the Generation Jumble Hub, where it gives you the link to all of the information you could ever want. The rules, including the command to actually play these games. It has, all the different Pokemon and what their movesets are. A lot of work was put into it. So massive shoutouts to Zach and Theus. And I think to a lesser extent AJ. I think he also worked on it. I worked on a Whippet too. So that's about everything. Let's just get into this. Now normally I would want to put the big three at the very top already. By the way, here's the viability. As you can see here, we have a lot of different tiers. I think this one's bigger than the tier list I made for Season 1. But that's because I think it's going to be very different. Mostly because a lot of Pokemon now... the main problem, I think, is with niches. Because since the three normal types... Since we don't know if they're going to absolutely dominate the format, it's harder to tell what things could have a niche and what things just don't matter. I'll use Psychic for example. Now Psychic, unlike normal, we can assume it's debatably getting even better. And because of that, anything that might have the bug typing, such as, Scyther here, anything like it's Bug Bite, we already know that's going to be a pretty decent niche. And while the normal types is still going to be great, something like Porygon, which is only really used because it can beat one specific Snorlax set, that is most likely going to be completely unviable. Because we don't know if Snorlax is even going to be on every team. But starting off, we have Venusaur, and I'm going to be honest, I have a lot of high hopes for Venusaur. I'm going to put him in A- tier. I already did a little bit of cooking. If you see the video I made earlier today, it was a bit of an expedition match between me, Zach and Theus, and a Cyber DJ. I used Sword Stance Venusaur, and it worked pretty well. Because Venusaur has a lot of new options now, and that's only because of one move, Poison Jab. Which, that alone, already makes Sword Stance a so much better strategy. Because now, you have Sweet Powder, Razor Leaf, Body Slam, Hyper Beam, Sword Stance. You have a big variety in your moves, and you suffer from 4th Movesaw Syndrome, but the opponent can never actually feel safe around you. And that's because, until you admit what set you actually have, Razor Leaf can just OHKO your Rhydon or anything weak to grass, or Poison Jab could just be really good, like Sap. Hyper Beam is always going to do a lot of damage, Body Slam could do a lot of damage and paralyze you. It gives Venusaur a lot of options, and makes it a very good weight gain cleaner. I don't think it's going to be the best Sword Stance user, because that's not going to be a very competitive tier, but it has a lot of stuff going for it, so that makes me happy. Now Charizard's like the complete opposite. I'm going to put it in E tier. Okay, it has Dragon Claw, but I don't think Dragon Claw hits very hard. So it's just a Sword Stance user that can use Slash and Fire Spin. Not really that good, especially since, unlike in Season 1, the Fire typing is just not very valuable here. We have a few different Dragon types, and all of them resist Fire. Not to mention, with that Flying type, Ice is going to be a big problem, because it's even more common than it normally would be. So there's just no real reason to use Charizard. But Blastoise is even worse. I'm just going to say Blastoise is just completely unviable. Blastoise, yeah, what does Blastoise even do? He's just a water type? Yeah, that's just not very useful. Like, what do you even do with bulky water that doesn't have, like, a blizzard or ice immunity, like Lapras here? Because I'm looking at all these Pokemon, and I just don't see anything that really cares about Blastoise. Like, sure, Rhydon does, but, like, is Rhydon even going to be that super good? Because Armaldo and Iron Hands here have a lot of options that, you know, like other bulky Pokemon don't have. So, hard to tell. I think these next three, Butterfree, Beedrill, and Raticate, are also going to be completely unviable. Raticate has Super Fang. However, the format now is just so much more faster than it normally would be. Because now you have, like, Naganadel, Zamazenta, and Sneasler. So things can just very easily revenge kill you. And it just... You're just never, like, able to do anything Eradicate, really. Not to mention, like, Hyper Beam, or just normal stab as a whole. It's not bad, but now you have, like, you have Gengar usually, but you also have Annihilape. And unlike a Season 1, Annihilape's typing is actually really good, and Annihilape itself is not too bad. So, Raticate just can't do much of anything, really. Now, Raichu... I think Raichu's gonna be way worse off here than it normally would be. Because its niche of being an electric type with Surf. Let's just start off by saying, electric as a whole is taking a big nerf. Not so much Zapdos, but with so many more dragon types, like, let's say, Goodra here, it's gonna be easier to find resisted stuff. And it just makes a type, or at least Thunderbolt, less viable. Especially for a Pokemon like Starmie. I think Starmie just won't be using Thunderbolt as much. Now you have Raichu, which is just a electric type with Surf. But I'm just going to give you a big spoiler. Rhydon, I do not think it's going to be... Or he's going to be good, like there's no doubt about it, but not to the degree he is in regular Gen 1 OU. And Raichu can even consistently KO him. So... Raichu just has nothing going on for it, really. Sandslash, I think it's a little better. But there's already so many good Sword Stance users. And another spoiler, I'm going to tell you, Alakazam is a lot better. However, actually, now that I think about it, Raticate should probably go in easier. I don't think it's completely unviable. Maybe even, these guys might be moved higher. Because now that I'm looking at some of the other stuff here, there's definitely some, how do I say it? There's some, big sinkers. But Sandslash isn't really one of them, but at the same time, like, I just don't see you reusing anything. Another big problem is that, with a lot of Pokemon like Naganadel, or Goodra, or Walking Wake, in general, it seems like there's gonna be a lot more special attackers. Which means a Pokemon like Sandslash won't really be able to do much with its physical defense. Sword Stance and Earthquake is always nice, but again, there is a lot of extremely fast things in the format. Which means that Sandslash is going to suffer a lot. But not really bad. Now, Nidoking. I think Nidoking would be D+. But there's... I just don't really see it doing a lot, to be honest. It has good traits. It has a huge move pool. And with Poison Jab, having that in Earthquake just makes it so much better. Makes it a lot easier to cover its weaknesses. But a big issue is that there's so many other types that do stuff better. It's going to be competing with Cloydsire as a Poison Ground type. And if I'm being honest with you, I couldn't tell you which one's better. So in fact, I think I'm going to actually just put these in the same tier. I don't know how good they're going to be. Both have good advantages over each other. And Poison Ground isn't actually a bad offensive type. You can hit pretty much a lot of stuff and while also being able to hurt Executor. I'm going to say Nidoking will be better than Cloydsire, but I don't have high hopes. But I do think if you use them, you can definitely, like, not suck with them. You might be able to win some games, but once it's actually time for the Generation Jumble Season 2 tournament, I would recommend not using them. I think Ninetales is probably F. I think it has more going for it than Charizard. That's only because of Confuse Ray. But outside of that, I just don't see you doing anything with it, really. And Parasect. Parasect's probably going to go in the E tier. And I think I'm going to put Amoonguss here too. Where is Amoonguss? Here it is. Because here's the thing with E tier. E tier has Pokemon that technically have some good traits. You could technically use them. And for both of these guys, they have Spore. But to be honest, Parasect is a lot better than Amoonguss. Amoonguss has Stun Spore and Mega Drain. So, in other words, outside of Spore, it has no way to actually harm the opponent. Meanwhile, Parasect has Spore. Stun Spore, I think. But it also has Slash, Growth, Hyper Beam, Swords Dance. It can actually do stuff. Well, Amoonguss can't really. But also, Amoonguss has a 4x Bug weakness, which is going to really suck. While Parasect has a 4x Flying and Fire weakness, the Fire one doesn't matter too much. The Poison, actually, it also has a Quad Poison weakness. That's relevant. And the Flying weakness is relevant, but only because of Zapdos. And Zapdos, even though Electric is taking a hit, it still has Drill Peck. Because of all the Bug and Fighting types, Drill Peck becomes a lot better, which is funny. But not so much for these guys. Spore is still very useful, so I'm just going to put it there. I think Venomoth is... I'm going to say it's the best of the unviable Pokemon. Because it's basically a better Butterfree, including having a better typing. And I'm pretty sure it does get Poison Jab. It could definitely make use of it and hit decently well. Same with Bug Bite. But not that hard, because it's not a physical attacker. So it has Sweet Powder, I think. But there's not really too much to really talk about there. Persian is always going to be a pretty decent Tauros alternative. I'll put it in... I'll put it in C tier. I think Persian... Like, if you're always going to use it with Tauros. And while not sure if normal is going to be as strong, at the very least, we didn't add a normal resist. We have Annihilate, which will definitely give Persian a bad time, but I don't know how much he's going to be used. I definitely don't think he's going to be an auto-include in all teams, which in turn means Persian is going to be it's going to be alright to use no matter what. Not to mention, I don't think Rhydon will be as omnipresent as he is in regular Gen 1, which is just even better news for Persian. So yeah, I think it's in a pretty comfortable spot. There's a lot of tiers here, so like, C tier might not seem like that bad, or that good, but you're in the middle, and I think it's not that bad. I just said that again, but whatever. Primeape is just completely unusable. It is just a worse Annihilate in terms of stats, but also doesn't even have the ghost typing. Speaking of which, why don't we just talk about him now? Where is he? Annihilate, we will find you. Actually, I can't. Oh, there he is. Annihilate is much more interesting to talk about, and I think Annihilate is going to be a solid... I'm going to put him in A tier. I was considering him and Gengar being equals. However, I don't think that's going to be entirely true, because Gengar is going to get Poison Jab, and it's going to be much better offensively. And, at least in my personal opinion, even though Annihilate can wall a lot of stuff with its typing, it's not doesn't really feel that great to play with. For stab, it has both low kick and submission, but both have their own issues. Low kick hits like a little bit harder than earthquake, but it's also less accurate. And submission obviously does more damage, but it misses a lot more. And that means your other moves are Thunderbolt, Body Slam, Hyper Beam. They're good. You have a good attack stat, and you're pretty speedy at 90 speed. But I feel like, offensively, there's always going to be stuff that's better than Annihilate. And Annihilate technically has Rage Fist, but it doesn't actually work properly in Gen 1 custom games. So it's always going to be stuck at 20 base power no matter what. But still, he's definitely in a very good position. Definitely a Pokemon I would consider using in a tournament. Arcanine, not so much. I'm not even sure if there's much to say here. It's just kind of bad. And that's putting it lightly. Now, Poliwrath, I think it's going to be a solid C- Pokemon. Submission is alright, but it also has Amnesia and Hypnosis. Both are pretty good. Not to mention, with Amnesia, it makes Poliwrath with Blizzard a lot better. But there's also better fighting types you could be using. And some with even more consistent moves than Submission. Not sure why I was brain farting on that. But it's definitely not bad. Not bad at all. And you can probably get away with using it. But it's more so one of those Pokemon that just catches the opponent off guard, and then with Game 2 they can prepare for it. But you can always use it. Oh boy, Alakazam. Now, for now, I'm actually going to put it in the big 3 with a question mark. And there's a reason why I have a question mark there. That's because I'm going to make an extremely hot take, but I'm going to say that the big 3 are not mandatory in this season. The only one that might be mandatory are like Chansey and Snorlax, but even then, I don't actually think so. Like, it's gonna be very hard to prove, but if they don't end up being the big 3, or like if the big 3 are still a thing, I'm gonna say that Alakazam actually has potential to be one of them. Because the more I just watch these games, the more it feels like Alakazam, more than Tauros, more than Chansey, and especially more than Snorlax, it feels like you need to have an Alakazam on your team. Because let's look at some of these other Pokemon that are here. You have like Iron Hands, it's super bulky and can just hurt a lot of stuff. Walking Wake, it's super fast and can just threaten a lot of things specially. You have like Minshao, which is really fast and can just threaten things with High Jump Kick or Sword Stance. And these two. Sneasler with 100 base 20 speed and the Gonadel with 100 base 121. There is a lot of stuff in this format that are incredibly dangerous. And a lot of things they can very easily handle. Like Jinx. Jinx is always like pretty good. But the Gonadel can always threaten it with a 120 critical hit Fire Blast. Sneasler just outruns everything and can kill everything basically. And even Salamence. Salamence is definitely got a lot of problems, but it's still a base 100 speed Pokemon with very powerful attack and defense, or attack and special. And it has Dragon Claw, so it actually has Stab as well. So when you have all these different Pokemon, I honestly feel like I would rather have Alakazam to deal with it. Because a lot of them can outspeed Tauros and do a lot of damage to it. Meanwhile, Alakazam, it can outspeed pretty much all of them. It can recover off damage, so it can beat stuff in a 1v1, even if it gets crit. Like Sneasler might win in a speed tie and get a crit Hyper Beam, but you don't want to risk it. The Gonadel can win with a critical Hyper Beam, but it's very dangerous to actually risk. Not to mention Gengar gets a lot better because of Poison Jab. There's a lot of things that are good that fear Psychic. And Executor has to worry about poison moves. Jinx, just is physically frail as always. Starmie, you would think, would be the better choice, because it usually is. But again, the Gonadel, Sneasler, these are faster. Technically, Zamazenta's faster as well. There's stuff that can deal with Starmie as well. It's risky, but Starmie is still great. but things can outspeed it, which you can take advantage of. Alakazam has, like, quite frankly, the perfect speed tier, and the Gonadel being faster than it is good, but it's you still don't want to risk it because of how valuable your Naganadel is. And also, if you don't get a crit, Alakazam could just very easily win the 1v1. So, I'm like, maybe someone can prove me wrong, and maybe as we do more, like, battles and we have the tournament, I could be wrong about this, but I genuinely believe that Alakazam is going to be in the big three. Snorlax, I'll just give you another spoiler. He's not going to make it. Tauros and Chansey very much might. But I think Alakazam is a must-have. It's going to be very hard to justify not using on your team. And that's because the format is just so much faster than in regular Gen 1 OU. Which is ironic, because we have a lot of slow Pokemon too. Such as Machamp. And Machamp I'm going to put in E tier. And also I'm going to bump some of these. I think these should go in F tier now. Because Machamp definitely cooks a lot less than these guys up here. Because it's a fighting type, but it's really slow and only has, like, submission really. So compared to the other fighting types, it's just bad. And compared to a meta where there's a lot of psychic types, such as Alakazam, it's even just kind of terrible. So just don't use it. You're not gonna have a good time. Victory Bell, you have the same tools as Venusaur, but I think Venusaur is faster, so I'm just gonna put you in D tier, I think. I just don't see you doing much. You're probably the best thing in D tier, but I would rather just use Venusaur, if I'm being honest with you. I think Venusaur also has more attack as well, if I remember correctly. Maybe even more special, but I could be wrong about that. Now, Tentacruel, I don't really know where to put Tentacruel, to be honest with you. I'm gonna go with B tier. Because I actually really like Tentacruel. Just like Venusaur, getting Sword Stance is actually a huge deal for it. Because it means he's gonna get Poison Jab. And with that, you can use Sword Stance, and now you just have a real, like, physical move. Because normally you only had Rapid Hyper Beam. But now you have a stab move you can use, which means Tentacruel can do a lot of damage. And keep in mind, Tentacruel has base 100 speed, so it's really fast, and with Wrap, it can trap stuff, and along with all of that, it has very high special. So I think Tentacruel actually has the tools to where, I don't know if it'll be OU, but it will be a very dangerous late game cleaner that you need to respect. And I think if something like Tentacruel does very well, that will in turn make Alakazam a lot better, which I think will be more evidence that he's going to end up being in the big three. Now, Golem, kind of hard to rank, because even Rhydon's fate is pretty unknown. I don't think he's that bad. I think C+ tier is pretty good for him, because he's going to have some tools that Rhydon doesn't. And potentially, how the meta goes, those tools could make it better. Because having Explosion could be very valuable. And since the tier has a lot of poison types that are going to be good, such as Naganadel and Sneasler, I feel like that makes ground pretty good. But at the same time, there's a lot more special attackers, so while Rhydon suffers a lot from that, it makes me feel like, well, if that's happening, then that probably means that, like, in general, like, the ground types won't be staying on the field as long as in, like, Gen 1 OU. And if that's the case, having Explosion could be useful. And I think Golem's a little bit faster too than Rhydon, which might be relevant. But it depends on what his speed tier is. I think he's still slower than Chansey. Or he's just not faster at all. Either way though, Golem, it's just gonna be like how he is in regular games, where you can just sort of use him every once in a while. A pretty respectable place to be in. And Swellow is weird. Because Swellow is gonna have a lot of problems. I think B+ tier is generous, because having a win con that's just Amnesia Surf is a lot more dangerous here. And that's because even though Electric as a whole is not as good as an offensive type, a lot of the Pokemon that still have it and that are good can be a threat to Slowbro. For example, Naganadel is insanely fast, and you're always going to want to use Thunderbolt because then it helps you beat Starmie. That has a great chance to just kill Slowbro. Not to mention being a Dragon type, it means Slowbro's Surfer is going to be resisted, and that's another problem. There's going to be a fair amount of things that can resist it, such as Goodra here, or especially Walking Wake, which means Slowbro isn't going to have a very good time. It's still going to be good, it's still tanky, and obviously against certain teams, Surf can just like brute force everything, but it's going to be a lot harder now to set up. So, it might drop to UU, but I couldn't tell you. I'll have to wait and see. The Magneton, I think E tier's probably fine. You can use it if you want, but for the love of God, don't. I don't think I have much to say other than that. And Dodrio's interesting. I think... Actually, I'm going to put Dodrio and Persian in the same tier. Some of you might think that's a no-brainer. Some of you might think, okay, why? Why would you ever want to use one over the other? But there is a chance that Dodrio could be better than Persian. And that's because there's more bug and fighting types. Which means Drill Peck, like I said with Zapdos earlier, is just going to be genuinely better. And if that's the case, I'd probably use that over Persian. And to be honest, if my theory ends up being right, and that there isn't actually going to be a big 3, I can even see some teams that would rather use Dodrio over Tauros, just because Drill Peck is just a very valuable move to have. I could be dead wrong about that, but I'm willing to give Dodrio a chance. Muck, I think... What would I put Muck? I don't think it has anything going for it, really. Like, it has Poison Jab now, but there's so many other things that are just better. So what do you do with Muck? It's just a poison type. Meanwhile, every other poison type has another typing to go along with it. Sneasel has the fighting type. Crobat, it has the Earthquake immunity, and it's also very fast. Gengar has Ghost. Naganadel is Dragon. Just a pure poison type is kind of bad. Maybe even terrible. And Cloyster, I'm going to put Cloyster in A- tier. Oh, by the way, even though Venusaur's A- tier, I don't think OC see enough play to see OU viability. It's weird. But, like, it's still very good. And Cloyster, I think, is also going to be good. And potentially, it could be boosted up even further. Because Cloyster, it has a lot of things going against it. Again, the format being faster, naturally having most of those fast threats be special. Not to mention a lot of fast fighting types that can just 2-hit KO it. Those are bad. But at the same time, Ice is even better now than it normally is. Not to mention Cloyster itself. Even though it's not super fast anymore, like, there's a lot of things that are slower than it. And if something's slower than it, then that means Clamp does so much more work than it normally does. Because if you actually look at some of the stuff that's we're going to be talking about, Armaldo, Iron Hands, Vespiquen, these are things that can very easily be clamp locked with Cloyster, which means a lot of the game can be put in your favor. So, Cloyster, it's going to suffer a lot, but it's also going to have a lot of very, very good advantages. So I think it's going to be in a pretty good spot in the meta. Gengar, I'm going to put in... I think I'm going to actually put in S tier. Maybe S-. I'll put in S- for now, but I can definitely see myself moving it further. It's just... It has so much to work with now. Like, it has... The fighting type immunity is now actually relevant, because fighting types are finally good. It still has its normal immunity, which is still going to be amazing. And Poison Jab not only helps it hit super effectively against Exeggutor, but it's also going to be good against the bug types. Meaning that Gengar has a lot of tools it's going to be cooking with. And it's going to be always good defensively, but now it's even going to be good offensively, because it finally has a stab option. And that just means Gengar, it can do wonders. it's going to be amazing. And even though psychic types like Alakazam are going to be everywhere, Gengar is already used to that, and he's going to find a lot of ways to, do stuff for your team. Onix is bad. Maybe even the worst Pokemon we have here. I don't think it's worth going. It's this much going into. Hypno, I think Hypno's probably going to be C-. It's going to be just an Executor without a poison weakness, in all honesty. Which could be pretty good. And there's not much to really say about it. Oh, I think Alakazam being, very omnipresent is going to make Hypno a lot worse. Because what reason would you want to use Hypno over Executor or Starmie or Alakazam? But you can make it work. You can definitely make it work. Kingor I'm going to put in D+ tier. He hits really hard with Swords Dance. And critical hits Crabhammer isn't that bad. But there's a lot of stuff now that resist it. Like Goodra resist it. And Walking Wake Mega resist it. It's really bad. But at the same time, Hyper Beam from Kingor does absolutely stupid damage. So you can, definitely make it work. But there's much better things you can be using. Like Executor. Executor is great. And unlike Gengar, where I wasn't sure, I think Executor is still going to be an S tier. Granted, the poison weakness is going to be annoying, and the bug weakness could be potentially terrifying. But despite that, I feel like it's still going to be bulky enough to where it's not going to have a hard time keeping its spot. Not to mention, maybe this is just me cooking and just folding later on, but it kind of gets more options too. Having Pokemon with poison is definitely annoying, but unlike Bug, you can actually fight against it. You have super effective Psychic, which could potentially dominate something like Gengar or Naganadel. Not to mention, a move that isn't usually used on Executor, Leech Seed. I know that sounds weird, but look at some of the stuff down here. Armaldo, Iron Hands, Goodra. These are Pokemon that would absolutely love to get some chip healing, but they can't because it's Gen 1. Executor, along with being a bulky Pokemon that could put things to sleep, can potentially also just help your team by giving them some reliable chip healing. And that alone gives it a unique niche that only it can do, really. So good for him. Hitmonlee, I think I'm going to put in unviable as well. Because you have, me and Xiao here, who already have high jump kick. And this thing is so much worse because of its abysmal base 35 special. I think that's what it is. And looking at this, I think I didn't put Hitmonchan in the tier list at all. Which is funny, but it would also go there. Now, Rhydon. Rhydon, I think A+ tier, I'll put in for now. Won't be surprised if he falls off, but he still has a lot of things going for him. He still hits really hard. I think he has by far the strongest non-boosted Earthquake. And if Zapdos ends up being really good, then obviously Rhydon, by default, is going to be really good. Not to mention, he also gets Poison Jab, which means he's actually going to have something he can use to hit Executor super effectively. Which could be handy, in all honesty. So, he gets some stuff to work with, but a lot of things that will definitely go against him. But if he ends up being good, I won't be surprised at all. Chansey, I'm going to put in the big 3. Goodra might be able to compete a little bit, but at the same time, even with Goodra's high special defense, there's not really something that can replace Chansey. It has a lot of HP, high special. It's very hard to really be better than Chansey. However, I do think that the meta now is fast enough, and there's at least enough things that are tanky enough to where Chansey isn't mandatory. And I know there is a lot of special attackers, which you might think by default means that Chansey should be better. But a lot of the new ones can also just fight back. Like the Gonadel has Hyper Beam, Gudra can't rest, but also, more importantly, can't eat Ice Beams and hit back with Earthquake or its own Hyper Beam. Salamence has really powerful physical attack. And then you have fighting types like Minshao, or Sword Stance users like Armaldo, and, again, Minshao, or Iron Hands. Iron Hands is so goddamn bulky that, like, Chansey can often be in a lot of danger. So even though it still has a niche that no one else can, replace, because it's Chansey, you can't have another Chansey, it's just not going to be as dominant as it normally is. Which definitely isn't a bad thing. It's still incredibly good, but like, I honestly think you can survive if you don't put a Chansey on your team. Although, more than Tauros, more than Snorlax, or any other Pokemon, you're definitely got a lot of games where you definitely will wish you had Chansey. So maybe it's still an auto-include, but who really knows. Kangaskhan is, like, okay, but not really any real reason to use it. I think there's more reason to use these two over Kangaskhan. Kangaskhan's a lot bulkier, but I don't think it really does you favors. There's actual fighting types now, not to mention with the meta being as fast as it is, you definitely would rather have, like, these guys on your team. Seadra is just dog shit. Sorry, I don't want to swear, but it's maybe even the worst Pokemon here. Even Onix has Bind and it has Explosion. So, just don't use Seadra at all. Like, at all. Now, Starmie. I really like Starmie. I think Starmie's like a fan favorite, but I do not think it's going to be better than Alakazam. Because even though it's very fast, like I said, a lot of the big threats are faster than it. And while Starmie does have Thunder Wave, it does have Recover. However, despite that, I feel like I would rather have Alakazam on my team if I had to choose one. But in all honesty, there's like no reason why you can't use both, or even all three of these guys. To be honest, you could even get away with just using a regular Gen 1 OU team, and you can still probably see a lot of success with it. A lot of options here, and Starmie getting Blizzard definitely means it's probably going to be the second best Psychic type. But because of it not being faster than some big threats, not to mention stuff like the Gonadel being an anti-lead isn't even that bad, Starmie can often be very threatened, which will give it a lot of problems. But definitely not bad, and not in the slightest. Is B- the only TR I still need to hit? Scyther, I'm not really sure. Actually, then I'm going to start moving everything. I'm going to move this to B-, the use of C+. I think Scyther is probably here. And the Blizzard weakness is obviously going to be really bad, but I think the electric weakness on Scyther is worse. And with Bug Bite and Sword Stance, it can be pretty fast and also hit like pretty hard, especially with Slash or Hyper Beam. And if I'm right that like electric as a whole is not as good, that means Scyther gets a little bit more breathing room. But actually, I'm going to put it in C-. I don't think it's going to be good enough for C tier, but it's definitely something you can use. No doubt about it. Jinx, as always, is going to be very good. I think A+ tier is, or actually no, S-. Because Psychic is good, Ice is also good, but with Fighting types and Dragon types in the format, it just becomes even better. It might be the best lead, but it's hard to tell because Naganata with Critical Fire Blast is very scary. But definitely not bad at all. It, just like Gengar, it gets more tools, but outside of, or not outside, unlike Gengar, who actually gets something new, which allows it to help thrive, Jinx, on the other hand, is just in a format that's more, susceptible to Psychic and Ice type moves. So making Jinx better offensively means by default, Jinx just has a lot more to do, more than just being a lead. Now, Pinsir, this is the reason why I decided to move Scyther, because I kind of realized, wait, why would I ever use Scyther over Pinsir? Scyther is faster, sure, but we've already gone over that there's a lot of really fast things in the meta. So Pinsir being bulkier, I think I would rather have. Not to mention Bind, I think it's just more useful. With Swords Dance, it can hit really hard. And now that I think about it, there's actually a chance Pinsir might not get Bug Bite. I'm pretty sure it gets Bug Bite though. If it doesn't, I guess Scyther's better. Or honestly, if it doesn't get Bug Bite, you can move Pinsir all the way to probably... I'd probably move it to F tier. But, it's still not bad. Ish. I don't know. Ghost types are a lot better now. I really don't know where to rank Pinsir, to be honest. Tauros, I think, is the one in the big three that by far is the least susceptible to falling. Because we haven't really found anything so far in the format that really beats Tauros. And by that I mean, like nothing, unlike Goodra, which is a worse Chansey, but still a good Pokemon overall, and Iron Hands, which we'll go over, which I will say is just a better Snorlax. Nothing really can replicate what Tauros does. Tauros is a lot faster than everything. Its coverage means it can threaten a lot of stuff, like the Dragon types with Blizzard, or the Poison types with Earthquake. And it's dangerous enough to where even things that are faster than it fear a critical Body Slam or Hyper Beam. So Tauros, I think, is just... like, it's gonna have a very comfortable position, where I don't think there's gonna be much changing on it when it comes to its standard moveset. So unlike Season 1, where Sceptile and Metagross, like, made Fire Blast very popular, there's not gonna be much reason for this season to use anything other than the standard Fire Blast, Hyper Beam, Blizzard, and Earthquake. And moving on. Gyarados. The Earthquake immunity is less valuable, which in turn means Gyarados is a little bit worse. It has high special, and it can use Blizzard, I guess, but I just don't see why you would want to use it over anything else, really. Lapras, on the other hand, definitely becomes a lot better. I think B tier is a good place to put it. Ice immunity is even better now, and Thunderbolt, it's still a very valuable tool to have, but I just don't think, actually it doesn't really matter with Lapras, because it has ice moves. So Thunderbolt can just be a good move you can use, and then if it switches into anything, you have Blizzard, and Blizzard on Lapras is going to hit the Dragon types really hard. And unlike Starmie, a Thunderbolt from the Gonadel is not going to KO you with a crit, but Blizzard is going to do a lot of damage, and considering the Gonadel stats, it might even just OHKO. So Lapras is going to be better than I think it would be in regular Gen 1 OU. Might even be enough to where you can see just viability again. Jolteon, I think... it gets still good, because it's the fastest thing in the format. And when you have stuff like the Gonadel, Sneasel, and Alakazam, being able to paralyze them is even more valuable. But it can't really hurt the Dragon types at all. So I don't know where Jolteon really deserves to be. Hard to tell. But I think A- is pretty good. But now I think I should probably move Venusaur to B+, in all honesty. I think A- was a little too good for it. So let's just move on. B+ now is not going to be things that are very good. But I think once you get the A tier, it's going to be once you have things that are actually OU. Porygon is just unviable. I think I already went over the reasons earlier. There's just no reason to use it. There's so much more power creep now that you're just wasting your time. Kabutops. You can use stuff with it, but the water type is just not as useful because Rhydon isn't as popular. Not to mention dragons are more popular, meaning it can resist that. Rock Stab is okay. There's bug types, I guess, but there's a lot of better things you can use to take care of them. And the normal resist, unlike with other games, you're not going to see normal moves spammed everywhere. So Kabutops just doesn't have any real reason to be used. Aerodactyl just unviable completely. No reason to really talk about it. It has no moves other than it getting Dragon Claw, I guess. Snorlax. I think Snorlax is pretty good still, but I think with the introduction of... Actually, I'm going to move it here. With the introduction of Iron Hands, it's just going to be... It's going to struggle a lot. Because its HP is almost identical to Iron Hands, but Iron Hands just has a little bit less. Meanwhile, Iron Hands has a lot of attack, it has more special, it's faster, and it gets Sword Stance. So, like, it doesn't beat Snorlax's Stab Hyper Beam, Self-Destruct, or Amnesia. I was brain farting there. Snorlax, still really good. You're going to win a lot of games with it, but it's no longer a mandatory pick. But still something that you can, like, use very effectively. But I feel like Iron Hands is almost always going to be preferred as the Snorlax-like Pokemon. Because along with having almost identical HP, Iron Hands has way more defense at 108. So it's just really good. And with Sword Stance, it can hit harder even without Stab. So, like, I don't know what else to say. This is the only one that I'm very confident will no longer be Big 3. Articuno does really good. I'm not sure if it's enough for OU. I'm going to say maybe, or no. I think B+ is still probably more accurate. Great, as usual. But I can't really explain why. I don't think it's going to be any fault to Articuno itself. But I just have a feeling that it's just not actually going to be OU. It could be if people, like, really want to use it. Because, unlike some other ice types, I think it can survive a critical Fire Blast from Naganadel. And might be able to OHKO with Blizzard. If that's true, and if the Naganadel ends up being insanely good, then Articuno might be like Moltres in Season 1. Just a really good alternative that beats the best Pokemon in the format. Zapdos is great. I'm going to put in A+ tier though. I don't think it's going to be good enough to be a S tier Pokemon. However, it's always going to be fantastic. And I'm going to put it above Rhydon. Because Electric is... It's still good, don't get me wrong. Like, it's still very good. And Thunderbolt's going to hit a lot of things very hard. But Drill Peck's really where it's going to shine. So many other things that it could just be able to just completely destroy. And a lot of things that could be annoying, like let's say Vespiquen, you can just take care of with a critical Drill Peck. So Zapdos, not as good as it was in Season 1, unfortunately. But it's never going to be bad. In fact, it's always going to be closer to great than it will be average. Moltres is taking a huge L. Compared to Season 1, you can still use it as like a late game agility fire spin cleaner. But it's just nowhere near as good. You got more resist with dragon types now. And just in general, I just don't really see any reason why you want to use it. For the video I did with the Generation Jumble Council, which you should still see, by the way, I brought a lot of points as to why I think Moltres isn't going to be that good. Once it's on the field, it's definitely going to be very threatening with Fire Blast. So I'll put it at the very top of D- tier. But I just don't think you should use it personally. I think there's better stuff you have access to. But the best fire type by far. There's no doubt about that. I don't really know where Dragonite's gonna go. I'm gonna put him in C tier. Because Agilirap is as gimmicky as it usually is. But with agility, it could be very threatening against other dragon types. Which is interesting to think about. It would be almost like an anti-dragon Pokemon. More so just using it to take out the other dragon types once you get an agility up. And with an agility, it might be able to outspeed the Naganadel, which will be a big deal. So that's where I think Dragonite's success really lies, personally. Crobat, I'm gonna put him in D- tier. Like, if Sword Stance users end up being really good, then Crobat's gonna be a lot better, because it has Haze. But with Poison Jab, which we allowed it to have, it can hit decently. It has base 90 attack. And with Pokemon like Alakazam being, very good, and with the Gonadel and Sneasel being good, that in turn could make Crobat a lot better. I still think even with just Poison Jab, Sneasel might be ban-worthy, but if Sneasel stays, then that actually gives Crobat a legitimate reason to be used on teams. So we'll have to see. Toxapex is just don't use Toxapex at all. It has nothing going for it. Nothing at all, really. It's tanky, it has Recover. What do? Stab, Surf, and Poison Jab don't do that much damage. You're just accomplishing nothing with Toxapex on your team. So it's just not even painfully mid. I'm gonna say Toxapex is just bad. Now we're finally getting to the new stuff. This should be fun. Goodra is definitely gonna be near the top. It has insanely good special defense, but you're also using max attack, HP, defense, special attack, speed, everything at once. And Goodra is one of those Pokemon that benefits so much from everything being maxed out. You have no idea. Goodra can tank a lot of special hits. It can hit back, both physically and specially. And with all the other dragon types, that in turn makes Goodra pretty good. So, it could potentially be a member of the Big 3. And that's what S tier here really is going to be. It's going to be Pokemon that are really good and could potentially be moved up here. And we're going to be seeing more of those very soon. But Golisopod is not one of them. I think C tier is probably where it's going to go. And all honesty, it's probably going to be a better Pinsir. So I think Pinsir I'm going to move down the D+ tier. Or no, I'll put it in the same tier as Scyther. I don't know which one's going to be better, because I don't remember if Pinsir even gets Bug Bite or not. But Golisopod, that I think about it, will just be better. It has more stats, it can hit a lot harder, but it doesn't have Hyper Beam or Earthquake, which is a big deal. But at the same time, with Stab Surf, you can hit Rhydon. Not to mention Stab with, Bug Bite. With a Sword Stance, you can destroy a lot of the Psychic types, and just your insane physical bulk with Sword Stance means you might be able to beat the normal types. So it's not a bad place to be in all honesty. It has great stats. A little bit held back by the move pool, but it's definitely a move pool that you can work with. No doubt about it. Just like Dragonite, I think its success depends on how good certain Pokemon are. Now, the Gonadel is another Pokemon that could very well make it in the Big 3. I don't think it will. I think it's just going to be, in many ways, a better Zapdos. Just a special attacker that can do a lot of damage whenever it's taken out. But unlike Zapdos, along with being, I'm just going to say it's probably going to be the best Revenge Core in the game. But it can also be just a great anti-lead. Because having Thunderbolt, Hyper Beam, and Fire Blast with a very, very good crit rate means with the most popular leads in the game, Starmie, Alakazam, and Chansey, with a crit, or not Chansey, I mean Jinx, but with a crit, you have the ability to literally one-shot all of them, meaning at the beginning of the game, you put your opponent in a very difficult position to where, do you want to try risking the matchup, or do you want to get hit with a crit? And his crit rate is absolutely, terrifying when you actually have to deal with it on the board. So Naganadel is going to be great. And unlike in other games, it's not going to be so great to where it has to get banned. Which is the best part. You can actually use it in OU. Isn't that great? Zamazenta is by far the most niche Pokemon here. I think C tier, or C minus, is going to be a good place to put it. But it can probably be boosted to C tier if you really wanted to. And I'll just keep it here because it was kind of mean putting it in the same tier as Poliwrath. Zamazenta has insane speed at I think 138. So it's not faster than Electrode, but by all intents and purposes, it's basically the fastest thing around. Which doesn't help a lot when it comes to actually outspeeding, because its move pool is terrible, because it only gets normal moves as attacks. But at the same time, that's not why you're using Zamazenta. Zamazenta has insanely high defense and special defense, and it gets both Light Screen and Reflect. And for Gen 1, those are always permanent for just the one Pokemon. So if Zamazenta uses Light Screen or Reflect, depending on which one it uses, it becomes basically unkillable. And that's the main thing you want to use it for. Even if it gets hit by Thunder Wave, because of just how fast it is, it has a great crit rate, and that's going to be how you do damage. Might not get Stab with Body Slam or Hyper Beam, but you're going to have so many different chances to get the crit because of how bulky you are, that you can use it to take out things that are just tearing up your team. It's going to be great, especially since we have a lot of genuinely great Sword Stance users. With great Sword Stance users, it's perfect that the Shield Pokemon can be there to stand up to them. Don't you think? Sneasler, also going to be S tier, and potentially ban-worthy. I saw some games of it today, which is Poison Jab. Without Dire Claw, it might be fine, but I'm really hesitant towards it just having it in tier. I feel like it makes Bug types and other fighting types less viable, because it's just way faster and with poison coverage and fighting coverage. So, I could be wrong about that. Like, starting tomorrow, we're going to start a suspect test before the tournament starts. We'll have to see if Sneasler is, like, ban-worthy or not. I'm going to be, leaning towards it being banned, but we'll see after I react to more replays and after I talk with the other council members. Sneasler could be fine, but we'll have to see. If it doesn't get banned, though, it's just amazing. It's tied with Alakazam for just being incredibly fast at 120 speed. It has Sword Stance. Poison's just a good offensive type. It can hit Executor or the Bug type super effectively. It can hit the normal type super effectively, and it's faster than them. And then Sword Stance and Hyper Beam just murders everything, really. So Sneasler could, it probably is just maybe the best fighting type. The only one that might be better is Iron Hands. And Walking Wake, putting this guy in B+ tier, but even that might be, or no, it's fine. Walking Wake is very fast at 109 speed, not faster than Tauros, which is annoying, but it does make you faster than Salamence over here, which is pretty relevant. Not to mention, a critical Hydro Pump can just murder everything, basically. It's enough to OHKO Tauros, and I believe it's enough to bring Snorlax full HP at 80. So when it's on the field, you have to respect it, but it can also just miss Hydro Pump a lot. So it's very good, and against other Dragon types, it could be your main answer to them. But at least for me, it's gonna annoy me a lot, because I already played some matches with Walking Wake, and I miss Hydro Pump a lot. So I think I'm just very biased right now. Iron Hands, I think out of all the new Pokemon, probably has the best chance to be in the big three. I don't think it will be, but it is so gosh darn good, and you have to respect it. I think it's a better Snorlax, in all honesty. Which, the reasons I already sort of gave you guys. It has basically Snorlax's stats, but all of them are just better, minus HP, which is just almost identical. And along with having Sword Stance, Hyper Beam, Low Kick, Earthquake, along with all of that, it even has enough special to where it can threaten some of the things here. Thunderbolt, I think 2-hit KOs Cloyster, and Thunder 2-hit KOs Chansey. And just like a Generation 2 overuse, it's so bulky that you can genuinely get away with using Thunder, because it's bulky enough to where you can try to go for it, and it won't be a big deal if you miss turns. That's literally why people use Sing on Chansey. Chansey's so good and bulky that you can afford wasting some turns, because no other Pokemon in the tier gets more free turns like Chansey does. And Thunder is even more consistent. So Iron Hands, I'm actually going to put, like, at the top of S tier, really. It's just really great, and you're going to see it everywhere. Even if Sneasler doesn't get banned, there's a chance it could be the best fighting type in the game. We'll have to wait and see. I really like Salamence. I think it's cool, but I don't think it's going to be better than B-. it hits hard, but I think Salamence, out of all the Pokemon, might be the one that suffers the most from... Or actually, now that I think about it, I was going to say suffers the most from normal types not being everywhere, because it makes Fire Blast not as good. But now I remember that there's just more fighting types. And with that, it actually could be better. Because the fighting type resistance, that's actually pretty good. And that's something the other ones here, the other dragon types can't really, you know, replicate. It also has the immunity to Earthquake. And along with that, it has Hydro Pump, meaning it can actually threaten Rhydon with an Oko. Dragon Claw just does very good damage. And at 135 attack, its Earthquakes and Hyper Beams are nothing to sneeze at. It kind of suffers from 4 move spot syndrome. But with Fire Blast, even if the normal types aren't as popular, there's definitely going to be fighting types, so you can always thread a burn on a lot of stuff. Not to mention the burn, or Fire Blast, can be strong against ice types that switch into it. So you know what? I don't think Salamence isn't as bad a thought as I originally predicted. I used Salamence today in a match, and while I lost, I didn't really feel like I could have been using something better. I feel like Salamence could actually be pretty good. You just have to be a pretty skilled trainer and just know how to, like, you know, work around its weaknesses. But it definitely has some strengths that the other dragon types don't. So I'm going to put it at the top of B tier. Vespiquen I like. I don't know if it'll be enough for OU, but it's a pretty decent, like, win con in a way. Because with Defense Order, you could just make it very hard to kill, even though it has a really bad defensive typing. And with Attack Order almost always being a crit, it means that you can outlast a lot of things with it. And Confuse Ray can make things very annoying. And with more Sword Stance users, such as Iron Hands, or like Haxorus, or even Tentacruel or Venusaur, Confuse Ray just makes it so much more dangerous. Which is weird. And I'm not sure if I really like Confuse Ray being meta, per se. But we can't deny that it could very well be OU viable. And if that's the case, then Vespiquen will have a place in the meta. But I'm not sure we'll see enough usage to be OU. Yanmega is just bad. It has Slash, good for it. Hypnosis, which is meh. Bug Bite, I guess it's kind of nice, but there's just not much to reuse Yanmega for. You're not going to use it in play no matter what. I'm sorry. Galvantula is interesting. I think B- is a good place to put it. It has Electro Web, which means it can always do decent chip damage and have speed control, which is not bad. In fact, with how many slow things are in the meta, like Iron Hands, or not so much Goodra. Goodra is actually pretty decent defense, but you have like Armaldo, or something like Haxorus, which has pretty decent speed, but not enough to where it's like outspeeding other dragon types per se. Electro Web can be good, and has regular Thunder Wave. It even has Slash, meaning that it can hit decently hard on the physical side as well. Not going to be better than Zapdos, and I don't even think it's going to be better than Jolteon, but it has stuff that it can do, which is really good. Alright, Haxorus. I don't really know where to put him. I'm going to put him at the top of C+ tier. He's potentially the best Sword Stance user, but I feel like he's a lot more frail than some of the other ones. I'd rather go with Iron Hands, honestly. And I think Venusaur and Tentacruel also have just some better advantages. And earlier today, I actually found out that Venusaur has a chance to survive a Hyper Beam from a Sword Stance Haxorus, which is funny. But I don't know. Venusaur might be a bit too high, maybe even Tentacruel as well. But I feel like these guys here have a chance for OU. It just depends on what happens. Minshao I think is great. I think A tier is not a bad place to put it. I think Sneasler doesn't get High Jump Kick. And if it doesn't, then Minshao being the best user of the move, in of itself will be a really good niche. It's pretty fast at 105 speed. It can use Sword Stance and also go for Reflect. it can be pretty threatening. And I feel like it's a Pokemon that you have to respect. But it's also Pokemon I feel like will very often go under the radar, which ironically is a good thing for it, as it means less people will try to prepare for it. So on the right hands, Minshao can be pretty good. And last but not least, we have Armaldo. And Armaldo I'm going to put in A tier. Potentially even A plus tier if it ends up being better than Rhydon. It's good. Being a rock and ground type, or a rock and bug type, I mean, is the perfect typing for a Gen 1 Pokemon. You have a Earthquake neutrality. You resist normal. What else can the bug type do? Oh yeah, that's right. Because of Bug Bite, you can actually threaten the Psychic type super effectively. And that, actually now that I think about it, means it should be at the same tier as Rhydon. Armaldo, if it gets a Sword Stance up, is very hard to deal with. Because Armaldo is also pretty tanky. So with Sword Stance, Bug Bite, Earthquake, Hyper Beam, that right there is enough to threaten pretty much every single thing in the meta. It's really good. And it could potentially be the best rock type. In fact, with Psychic being better than ever, I think it probably will be the best rock type. But being better than Rhydon's still a very hard thing to justify. But that's the tier list. I want to know what you guys think. Obviously, a lot of things can change, and these are just my initial thoughts after just playing a few games. But I think that this season will be a lot better than the first. And I also think that you watching this, you should join the Discord server. You still have till April 2nd before it's too late to participate. But at the moment, no reason why you can't just join the server and just have a few practice games. Everything you need is going to be there for you. There's going to be people who can help explain things for you. Not to mention, we have a lot of people in different time zones. We have a few people that are in, like, Europe, for example. So even if, like, there's a lot of American people, if it's, like, 5 in the morning for us, there might be some people who are online. And also me. I also end up being a night owl, so I might be available at all times as well. Well, I think that's about it. This was a pretty big tier list, but I feel like a lot of these I'm pretty confident at. A lot of them I can definitely see moving down, and some things moving up. But for now, this is my tier list. I'll try to get Cyber DJ and Zack and Theus to make their own. And if I'm able to, I'll try to post these in the YouTube community tab. But if not, I'll just post it on Twitter and give you guys the link. But if you have your own ideas for this tier list, I'm going to put this tier list into the description as well. And it's also going to be pinned in my Discord server. So if you have your own thoughts on the meta, let me know. But until next time, this is Groundback, and I look forward to hearing from you.